Welcome to Cut the Fluff, a space where we drop the small talk, peel back the curtains, and truly delve into what it is that makes us tick and what's keeping us up at night. You can expect honest, raw, and very vulnerable conversations.
What's your story? What's your sign? It's like we're twin flames in a different life. Deep connection lights a spark. It's like you know me in the depths of my heart. We're dreamers.
Hey folks, and welcome back to episode 2 of Cut the Fluff. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the cycle of self-sabotage and getting caught up in the comparison game. We'll also be discussing that as women, we want to be chosen based on merit and not because an organisation is simply trying to hit their diversity and inclusion quota. We also touch on making friends as adults, the scarcity mindset, and writing your own obituary. We hope that you enjoyed today's episode, and as always, if you like it, hit the subscribe button and feel free to share this episode with a friend that you think might find it useful. Welcome back. Episode 2, here we are. We made it. Can you believe we haven't run away just yet?
One of us tried.
I did receive a brief phone call from Anika this morning being like, I need a bit of a pep talk to just get me into this next one. And that's actually my segue into this first discussion that I wanted to have with you was, how did you feel after recording the first episode? Walk me through just how you felt.
Like straight after we did it or during or...
all of the above, during, straight after, and the days to follow. I'm just interested to hear your experience because I certainly noted something about my experience.
Oh, really?
And that I see is a common pattern with myself. And I just wanted to see if you potentially experience the same things.
I'm so curious about what you felt after. Okay, but I'll share the journey in a nutshell. Recording it, we started, and I'm sure it like kind of shows in the video and our voices, but like, yeah, a little stop start and like, oh, we're just finding our way, which is what this podcast is all about. Mm-hmm. So that was fine. I expected that. During it, I was like, we're just rolling with it. Like, I don't know if I should have said that. Oh, I just said that. Okay. And sort of a lot of self-filtering going on. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you had that. Like there's probably things I would have said if we weren't recording and been even more off the cuff, but I was like holding back a little bit. And then I said things and I was like, yeah. And then post, I don't know if this is maybe what you felt, but I was like, I need to talk to Danny about maybe editing some of those things out. Like, some of the things at the beginning about mom and then at the end. Yeah, I felt a bit uncomfortable after. And I think that's why I called you this morning. I'm like, I don't know, maybe we need to plan this out a bit more, not be so off the cuff. But like, I'd say emotions like this, like, this is great. You should just do things. Progress over perfection. Come on, Anika, like, this is what you're about. And then like, what if the world sees me like this? I'll never get booked for anything. Or
isn't it fascinating? And I can very much resonate with that. So while it was happening, I was kind of like, oh, we're in the flow. We're really just doing it. We've showed up. That's the first step, you know. And then as things progressed, I also felt a sense of like, oh, should I be saying that? Is that correct? And then afterwards, when I listened to the podcast, I was really happy with it. But then as days start to follow, and then I'm trying to navigate the kind of behind the scenes stuff of how to upload a podcast, and there's so many other podcasts out there. And then, you know, you start this comparison game from that perspective. And then also second guessing the content that we're creating. And is it going to be of use to anyone? You know, why are we even doing this? And you start going into this cycle of self-sabotage. And it's something that I find I do quite often. I will either not start a project, or once I've completed it, it will just sit idle with me and never actually make it out into the world. I have so much incredible content that in the moment when I'm creating it, I'm so in the flow and I'm really like truthfully aligned with the message. And even with what we discussed during our last podcast, I don't feel like I said anything that was untruthful or didn't align with where I'm truly at. But I still went through this self-sabotage cycle. It's something that I truly recognize, I think, within a lot of women that I speak to, particularly. And there is this one saying, a man walks into a gallery and he looks up at this massive painting up the wall. And this massive painting is literally just a canvas that is 10 meters by 10 meters and it's just been painted black. And he's standing there looking at it, and another guy shows up next to him and he goes, I could have done that. And that guy turns around and says, well, that's the difference between you and him. He did it and you didn't. And that always, when I go into that mode of like, oh God, is that, meant to be out there, or this second guessing myself, that always comes into mind, that particular story. So I don't know if that will potentially help someone else out there to see it from a different perspective, but are there any particular things or traits that you have, or little things that you do to really help yourself break through that self-sabotage cycle?
There's this thing I think I read in Sam Harris's book, and now I might be butchering that. I'll have to check it and we can put it in the show notes. The idea that you have 20 seconds of, they call it activation energy, before, like when you go, I want to go to the gym, or I want to meditate, I'm going to like actually cook dinner. You've got 20 seconds of like unwavering commitment to doing that thing. And so that's where you're all aligned. You'll start working toward like getting your shoes to go to the gym, or like getting the pots and pans out. If you don't act in those 20 seconds, that's when you give the mind the opportunity to talk you out of it. I've always sort of had that at the back of my mind, and I know myself that I need structures and systems in place so that I can like get ahead of the 20-second what did I call it? Activation. Like I know when I'm going to back out of something, if I've already like put the shoes next to the bed or the yoga mats rolled like out and ready, I'm more likely to do it. I don't know, maybe that's more for habits, but the self-sabotage, like when it comes to creating and like posting my own art and thoughts, kind of like this, I couldn't tell you how many articles I've written, how many like programs I've got ready to launch. It's like a little bit of failure to launch. Like they're sitting in all over my desktop, like, and in files, and I just haven't clicked publish because a voice gets in the way. Sometimes I'm like, oh, we'll wait for this moment. It'll be ready when, and those excuses.
So on. What do you feel would help you? Do you feel that having this kind of relationship like you and I do, where we almost are, I find a bit of like, we've come into that dynamic as accountability buddies?
I think that's the ticket. I just think we have finite amounts of willpower, and we're all human, and we all face like this imposter syndrome of this self-sabotage. And instead of trying to like fight it all the time and overcome it, which I think maybe is a masculine energy, like the doing, the yang energy. I think as females, like we want things to flow. We want things to feel effortless and easy. That's not that you don't put effort in, but I'm kind of coming to this point where I'm like, I don't want to effort so much. I want to be able to go with the flow. And I think doing it with other people is like, that's the gas. That's how you do it.
I guess if you can't find the space where you have people that you necessarily resonate with, or you can't find that online, create it. And I think that's where we're coming from with this. We couldn't find something out there that really resonated with the way that we operate. So we're creating it amongst ourselves with the accountability perspective. And also on the forefront of talking about masculine and feminine, I know this whole working with your cycle thing, originally I was like, this is a whole bunch of woo. But the more and more I've become in tune with my cycle, I'm very much realizing there are certain times within the month that I'm a lot more productive than I am with the rest of them. And I'm starting to honor that the 20s of each month for me. I believe I'm ovulating, but I am on fire. I'm just like, yep, productivity. I've got creativity coming through my ears, and I have learned to honor that, because I was really coming to a point where I was trying to force creativity 24/7. While it's a really great skill to have, to be able to keep yourself at that level consistently, I don't think it's sustainable, and I don't think it's a realistic thing for a lot of people. So I think learning to honor your cycles, particularly as someone that does have one. I read In the Flow by Alyssa Vitti. She has a really good book that covers all of this. So I will link that in the show notes below.
Yeah, that is so true. We've talked about that too. We're like, let's make sure we always are recording during the 20s of the month, because we seem to be in sync, even though we're in different states, which is the power of womanhood. Just on the point around like creating and then like sitting on your hands and not putting it out in the world, have you got something like that? Like, what's the one thing that, like, my partner and I, when we met, and like still to this day, he reminds me, the thing that I said when we met was like, I don't want to die with the music inside me.
I love that saying. Yes, do not die with the music still in you. And I live by that saying. I can't believe that. I have goosebumps.
Like, it's a mantra for life. And it gives me heart palpitations, right? Like, I would rather express my gifts and my self to the world in whatever clunky way that looks, than not. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like everyone has this thing, and maybe once you've like done that thing, a new thing emerges into your life. But like, what's the one thing for you? What's the music that remains trapped inside for you, that if you could express it, that would just be like, if you were to walk off the planet tomorrow, you'd be like, I did that thing?
I have a couple of them that sit within me, and I have a thing where I experience life paralysis, where I have so many things that I feel are the music within me that I just get so overwhelmed by all the things that I would like to produce that I just end up kind of stagnated at the crossroads. And it's something that I'm really trying to work with, is like consistency is key. So choose one thing and work with that while the others are plottering on in the background, but really channel your energy into, where attention goes, energy flows. So I think what I have a habit of doing is like dipping my toe in every single option that I see, rather than really dedicating my time and attention to the one thing. I have a couple of things. One thing that comes to front of mind right now, right here, is I captured my experience in the US firsthand. And I mean the good, the ugly, the tears, everything, the highlights, the lowlights. And I can certainly see that coming together as maybe a doco of some sort that really showcases what it's like. A lot of us have a tendency of, and I don't know, maybe I fall into that category, but a lot of us have a tendency of putting up this facade of, when you're out there chasing your dreams, that, it's all glitzy and glam, but there is such intensity and heartache that goes along with the roller coaster that I don't think a lot of people have managed to capture firsthand. And I hope to share that one day. I have footage galore that I just need to work through and get on with that project. And I think a lot of people out there would be able to resonate with the messaging and hopefully get insight into what it's really like to try and get a break in the big smoke. So that's probably one thing for me personally.
Oh, I got full chills when you just so
yeah, it's quite and I think there's an element of the intensity of it. I'm really raw in some of the footage. I've just come off this roller coaster of being told, for example, I've been booked for a job, or I've been put on hold for a job, and then just dumped at the last minute. And you're just like, what? And then all the emotions that come with that. And I remember specifically, there was some footage around my agents telling me that I had to lose weight and work on my ass to get into Miami Swim Week. And I was at my thinnest at that point. And just, I guess, having the level of awareness that I did as a 28-year-old going into the market in LA, I was able to somewhat stay, I guess, true to myself, and not go down that route of trying to appease to others' ideas of which way my body should appear. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. But do you have any projects yourself?
Many projects. When you did this with your hand, you stretched it out. I'm like, yeah, that hand and this hand and my toes. Yeah, I think because last episode we talked about the Renaissance woman, or the like multi-passionate entrepreneur who has multiple income streams, multiple passion points. And this idea that, like, I can't drop this word, like this word is imprinted in my head now, and I think it means things for different people, but like sovereign beings. I don't know, I love that word. I'm like all about sovereignty, like self-sovereignty, creating your own wealth, not being reliant on systems, on governments, on like external forces to create that wealth for you. Sovereign being in terms of your health, like you're in charge of that. No one is putting anything in your body to manipulate that for you. Like you get to own that, and into other aspects. So self-sovereign. But yeah, back to multi-passionate entrepreneurs. And I think it's a double-edged sword, like being really interested in lots of things and having experiences in a lot of things, and being able to like augment conversations with people or work with different people because you've got different vantage points is awesome. But like, yeah, the other side of the sword is so many things on the boil and not seeing things to completion. And I think that's really upsetting for the soul. And I think that factors into your identity and your belief system around like, I'm not someone who finishes things. I think that can be really detrimental.
And particularly when you're comparing yourself to everyone else, like, and I consider myself a conscious user of the, the platforms such as Instagram, but you're out there comparing yourself and you're like, God, they're like, 28 and they're at that point in their lives. And, this vicious cycle begins internally. You're like, God, why can't I, achieve as much as this individual has achieved? But then I always try to take a step back and be like, okay, my story is not theirs, firstly, and actually take a moment to have a think about everything that you have achieved in your lifetime up until this moment, based on your own storyline, nobody else's. But I have a feeling because we're faced with the online realm, back in the 80s, you were comparing yourself to Susie and Margaret down the street, but now you're comparing yourself to a world scale, and it can be quite crippling to feel like you're almost behind in some ways, but that's not the truth.
It's not the truth. And I think that saying of don't compare your beginning with somebody's middle or end. We don't know how long people have been working away at their craft or whatever they're doing. And we're not all in the same boat. We are not in the same boat. Like, people are in different circumstances, different backgrounds. And you're right. Like, that exercise of just writing your own, I've done this a few times. Have you done like your own narrative, like writing your story?
I wrote my own, is it called a eulogy?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I wrote, this was only about a month ago. For some reason, I was writing my morning pages and I was like, I'm going to write my own eulogy. I hope I'm saying that right. I feel like I'm saying that wrong, but anyway.
Yeah, it's like the speech at your funeral.
Yeah, for speech at my funeral, for those that don't know what a eulogy is. I wrote it because I wanted in that moment to understand and capture what I wanted to be remembered for. And like based on that very moment that I had lived life up until, and looking back in hindsight of like everything that I achieved in that moment, as if I was to drop off the side of the planet right here, right now. But yeah, what people would actually be saying and the way that I perceived myself as well up until this moment. And that was quite confronting, won't lie. There were a couple of tears shed, but it also gave me a really good insight into, hey, am I actually living my truth? And am I comfortable with the way that I'm progressing forward to ensure that I don't die with the music still in me?
Yeah. So can you share like some of the themes that came out and how?
Oh, I don't It's in my bedroom. I've got my journal in my bedroom. Some themes that came out. I think for me personally, it's kind of the idea of leaving no stone unturned. And, you know, that whole concept, I guess, plays into ensuring that you don't die with the music still in you. And just taking a step back and even going to the bare bones of being a great partner, being a supportive friend, being a really great sister, daughter, and just what light I've actually consciously tried to spread out into the world. And just taking a firsthand look at that really brought me a lot of joy, and also kind of gave me this idea that it's not all about the end product. It's actually the process and the journey of getting to where you believe you're destined to go. And I think that was really, really insightful for me personally.
Wow, I think we all need to go write
Eulogies.
hidden messages for our soul, right? Of like just a remembrance for, it's not about the tick boxes and how much did you get done, but like who were you and how did you make people feel? Because that's what people remember, how you made them feel, right? Not what you did.
What is it, Maya Angelou saying? People won't remember what you said or did. They'll remember how you made them feel. And that always resonates with where I'm at. And in all honesty, the reason why I feel we started this podcast is we want others to feel seen through our process, through our discussions. We hope, even if one person out there says, I feel that way, I don't feel so alone in my thoughts anymore. Yeah. I'm happy to bow out.
Definitely. I mean, you know this. So I've been like slogging away for the last 2 weeks or so in my spare time writing the copy for my new website.
Yeah.
And like trying to bridge all the things I do. And last episode, like actually that was really insightful. I feel like, because we were tossing around some of the names for this, I think we could possibly call this podcast also talk therapy.
Yeah.
Because just by talking, I was like, oh, I recognize that all these seemingly disparate things that I do have to have a through line. Like that's what it means for me. Like I have to feel connected. And so writing the copy for my website is taking me so long because I feel like there's layers and layers of like, just get to the kernel of like, not what you do, but who are you and who do you want to be? And so it's been like journal writing and soul searching. And the thing that I keep coming back to is whether I'm facilitating a workshop, whether I'm doing a speech, whether I'm like holding a dinner party around my table, I want people to feel seen, feel heard, and that they matter. That's it. Like, drop the mic. Like that's it.
Amen. I'm going to let you guide the next part of this conversation. You mentioned something on the phone to me very briefly, and I will say this, that we don't actually discuss what we're going to discuss prior, but you did drop a bit of a truth bomb on the phone to me earlier. I don't know if you want to go down that pathway. Which way do you want this to go?
Look, I think you've set it up to dive into the conversation. Can't leave the listeners hanging. Like,
yeah. Well, maybe it's like a good marketing ploy. They'll actually tune into the third episode.
I will share what I mentioned to you, and I think it's probably something that crosses every woman's path. It either has, or it will, or it's played out for their friends or their colleagues in some shape or form. It's around the idea of diversity and inclusion. Like, we've had a big shift in the corporate world, and I think outside of the corporate world, and thinking about how we have more diversity and inclusion in those places and spaces. And I'm all for that. I'm all for like wage equality and everyone having a seat at the table. But where it gets me is like, I fundamentally believe you want to have a seat at the table. And I want to have a seat at the table based on merit, like based on what I'm bringing to the table, my experience, my skills, what I've got to say. When it's like a box checking exercise, not here for that. Like, I think that diminishes the integrity of the person that's stepping up to the plate to like tick that box. Like, I don't want to be a number you have to feel. And so this came up because I had a client call just before this, briefing me on a project, and it was cool, and I'm chatting with him, and I'm like, so why didn't you ask this other guy who is in the same region as me and has worked with the team, and like, I'm just curious, why did you ask me to do it and not invite this other guy? And there was this awkward silence, and they were like, oh, well, you know, like 3 white males doesn't look too good, does it? Oh, it was that. Like, it took away everything from the conversation we'd had, and it took away any sort of, like, I got to a point where I'm like, I know what I'm good at, I know what I can do, and I know what I've done, but it takes, you know, you want to be there because, hey, Anika, we heard you're great and you did a great job on that last thing, and we really, really, really want to work with you, versus like, we need another face up there, and because you're half Indian, that's like also ticking the colour box.
Diversity, oh my God.
I mean, it didn't go there, but they were uncomfortable with that. And I'm like, well, isn't that an interesting space where you're uncomfortable even telling me that you're picking me because I tick the diversity box? And now I feel uncomfortable and almost like unworthy of this position. And so I think no one wins. I think it's like we're playing lip service to an idea, but not truly going about it in the way that like real diversity and inclusion should be played out, which is like, you know, on the basis of your ability.
Your merit, yeah. I'm sorry, firstly, that you had to experience that firsthand, and I can imagine that the experience has been quite deflating after being like on a high, and then just having that said to you, just like, what? I saw this play out firsthand as well. Prior to leaving to LA, I used to work in corporate events, and I used to work in the energy realm. There's a lot of engineers in the space, and there aren't many females. And the board decided that I was working with that every panel should have a 50-50 split of male versus female. I just felt so uncomfortable in the process because there weren't as many females in this particular industry, and there were individuals that were males that were considered experts in particular areas. We were going to these women and saying, hey, we'd really like you on these panels, and they were getting up there, and then the feedback that we were receiving regarding the speakers was, you know, really terrible, and it reflected badly on us and on them. And it got to a position where I started feeling really uncomfortable about the fact that these poor women were getting up there, and quite knowingly they were being put up there because of the 50-50 quota that we're trying to hit. The missing link in this particular instance was the fact that none of the females in the industry that were there were being nurtured to come up to the level or the space that the males were operating at, or they just weren't there just yet. And so rather than going based on this like tokenistic approach, we started looking into how we could actually build a support system to really nurture these women that were wanting to get up on stage with their male counterparts and still be there based on merit, not solely based on the 50-50 split that we're trying to reach. And I see it play out across so many industries. Even in the US, they have a quota that they must reach for modeling jobs, big campaigns. You know, you need the Black, the Caucasian, the Hispanic, Asian, and a mix ideally. So they need to hit quotas. And that's where I feel a level of discomfort and dis-ease when we're solely going down that route just to hit and check the box, as you discussed. How do you envision this I guess not conversation, but how you envision this going forth? What do you perceive as the right way to go about this? Is there a right way?
And I mean, isn't that the $1 million question right now? And I think even talking about it, and I think men men would be too afraid to even say what we've said about it being tokenistic. And I think even that's a shame, because it is. Like, here are two women from different industries saying, I don't like having my name put into the ring because I'm a woman. I want you to be choosing me because on merit. And I think the conversation should be exactly what you said before about nurturing and giving space for women to rise up and be in positions where they're chosen on merit. I think that, like, it has to start a layers below on, like, bringing women in and, like, building the leadership capability, building the speaking skills, building the confidence. I mean, we could have a whole nother episode on females feeling confident about their self-worth, and, like, owning their space. And I think that's where it really starts. Like, we've got to take more ownership of growing that. And so, yeah, like, even in this industry, in that conversation I had with those two white males was, you know, I think the precursor to that is, well, bring us into the conversation. I've got other female colleagues who work in that space, and they're like, we've put our hand up to help educate you and lead you into ways that can be more inclusive, that where women feel like we're actually part of the conversation. We're not just a token. But they're shutting those conversations out until it's like, oh, the dollars are on the line. The client wants to see diversity. It looks good. So then we're picking you. So I think, yeah, to your question, like, we've just got to be thinking holistically, 360, about how are we raising women now to think about themselves, to put them in positions where they're getting chosen based on merit. Because I think we all agree there should be equal opportunity.
Yeah.
Nobody's not saying that. But we all just want to feel good about ourselves when we arrive in that position.
Yeah.
Hey, what about females? I think this is an interesting segue. I'd like your opinion on it. But females helping females, and we've seen memes out there that, like, behind every successful female are, like, a tribe of other women. I'm butchering that, but the idea of women supporting women.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's another area where women give that lip service, but when women are feeling like the shadow side of putting yourself out there is, like, scarcity, there's not enough to go around, competition, jealousy. And so I guess my question is, like, do you think women supporting women is an important part of that framework for, you know, this equal opportunity and women being part of the conversation?
Yeah.
Part of that, like, we've got to have women mentoring women and showing them the ropes.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I feel like there's a deeper question that you're wanting to ask here, though. Am I sensing that do I actually feel like women support women?
Oh,
or have I just...
Do you feel like women support women? That's the kernel of the question. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Freud.
No, thank you, Freud. I've never assigned myself to the scarcity mindset, and I personally have seen it play out. It's an interesting dynamic because I'm going from the modeling realm perspective right now when I speak. Women as a whole support the whole, you know, diversity movement, self-love, and there's that aspect of everyone being in the same boat and seeing that as a cause that they're fighting for. But then there's some level of competition that plays out, particularly if you have a scarcity mindset, that, hey, I'm actually technically up against you because only one of us can be booked for a job or whatever it may be. So there's almost this, like, dynamic playing out of, hey, we have this vision and this is the message that we're putting out there, and we believe everyone should, you know, love their bodies, etc. And there shouldn't be any competition against women, and you shouldn't compare yourself to others. But then there's the element of, as well, you know, you're up against that individual technically. And so I've seen that play out behind the scenes. I'd like to say I've never gotten involved with it because I'm of the mindset that there is enough of the pie to go around. I've personally diversified my income enough to not have to solely rely on modeling. And I know that if it's your bread and butter, you probably have a bit of a different relationship with how that pans out. Does that answer your question, or have I gone on a total tangent?
A good tangent. A good
Okay.
one. Thought to like the idea of how it can play out in your industry and where we see that. And I love that you don't have that scarcity mindset. And I know that's true. You're not.
I feel like I'm acting all woke here, but I totally might not be able to actually perceive myself. I'm just, the way I guess I perceive myself, but I might be perceived differently out there in the world. So who knows?
Yeah, you see what people are saying about you.
Yeah.
Taking on the modeling job, beating down other women. No, and I wonder if this was in your eulogy, because I think I would want this in there too. This idea of like being seen, being heard, and that you matter, is that you're building other people up and like exposing their beauty and their greatness. And I think that's the spirit of the sisterhood, is when we do that, that's magical. Like that's something women have in spades against the men. Like we have that. That is inherent in our DNA as women, is to connect and be collaborative and be a tribe in the best sense of the word.
Yeah, because it genuinely, like, particularly when you look at motherhood, it does take a village. So I feel like we have that innate wisdom of really understanding that we have to work together in order to survive. If we take it back, a couple of thousand years ago, but even now, like staying connected and nurturing each other. And I've seen that, and I feel like we refer to memes a lot, but I've seen that thing. You want to just scroll.
That's how I get my
lockdown scrolls. That saying, surround yourself with women that will mention you in a room full of opportunities.
Love that. Yes. Do you do that?
Yes, absolutely. I'm a name dropper. I think I can get a little bit annoying sometimes. Yeah, but I'm like, I don't know. Someone says they have gut issues, and I'm like, you know what? I know this great person, or I know, someone that has skin issues, and I kind of consider myself Charlotte in the web, and just connecting people with people that I truly align with, and I truly believe they have a lot to give to this world, and I've seen them in their flow, in their power, in speaking their truth, and I love that. So I'd rather, I think word of mouth plays a huge role in getting new business in. So yeah, even if it's not from a business perspective.
Well, even from like I've newly moved to the area here in Byron and had zero friends, and moving at a time when it's like weird times in the world where you don't know how people feel about the world, whether they want to interact or they don't. But like friend introductions,
friend
introductions. I just made that. That's a new word. I met this woman. I like pawn my kids out at the playground, so I like make them go and play around people that I think I would like to connect with and have a glass of wine.
Go over there. Come on, go play.
Forced connection. But I've met some really lovely women that way at the playground and like formed genuine connections. But I met this one woman here in Byron who I picked up at the playground one afternoon, and she has been so generous in the way that she has introduced me to her friend circle. Because I think you said it doesn't always have to be a business context. And I think, in a life context, like sharing the wealth, sharing the resources, and like the feeling as an adult of being brought into an established group of friends. And actually, she has different friends all over the place, but being brought into that and her generosity of spirit around that. I actually mentioned it to her. I was like, that is really beautiful to see, because I think even a scarcity mentality around friendships can play out with women and our like cliquey friendship circles. Like, they're mine. If I introduce them to Daniela, she's going to take them over there and I won't be invited. And this was playground, like schoolyard mentality, I think, can play out of scarcity. Yeah, I think, women helping women and supporting women in all aspects is just like, it's the best. What do we think, like if we want to give some tools for people or some questions for them to ponder on?
That came to my mind as you were talking about that was when you're standing in a circle, leave the circle open. This is more in physical when we're in physical, but if we're actually talking in a circle, actually leave the end of the circle open to allow space for others to move in. And that very minute change in just the space allows others to feel welcomed in to the conversation or whatever it may be, rather than keeping the circle closed. I've heard that previously.
Have you road tested that?
Have I road tested it? I generally have a tendency, I like to think I have spatial awareness. So I try to keep like myself open to be able to allow anyone else in the space in to speak or join our little clique.
So nice, especially at like the beginning of networking events or
they're anxiety inducing.
Do you get nervous before those?
I don't like small talk. And I think that's where I struggle. I think this whole podcast, the fact that we've actually named it, by the way, we've named it Cut the Fluff on the basis that cut out the small talk. I like to get into the nitty gritty. I like to know what makes you tick. And I know there's a time and space for all of these conversations, but I'm done with the small talk. I really am. And I think that's where I get kind of hives every time I go into, the corporate-y stuff, working events. I'm just like, I can't do this small talk thing. Like, take off your layers, take off your masks, talk to me, what's going on? And some people find that really confronting, and I need to honor that. I need to kind of, as we're talking about it last episode, was like either rein it in or let it, your freak flag fly.
I mean, it's so funny that you and I actually met in LA at a strange dinner party. Like, we didn't know that. I was going to say a stranger dinner party, but like there were 30 strangers there, and we just happened to, you walked in and I was like, she has a friendly face. And I think at these events, my like subconscious is looking for a safe face. I think we all do that. We're like looking for safety, appease my limbic brain that's like looking for certainty. And you looked certain. And
why, thank you.
Yeah, and I was like, I want to sit next to her because she feels safe. And that's how we, like, this is neuroscience. Like, once we feel psychologically and physiologically safe, we open up our brain to be able to have deeper conversations. And so, I mean, in some of my workshops, the number one goal is to make people feel safe as soon as you can, straight off the bat, even before you've opened the conference or the workshop, is to be creating ways for people to have that safety, so that when you call on them to answer a question or you get going or you put them in groups, they've already got that psychological safety there, so they'll be more receptive.
Are you able to provide insight into how you make people feel safe? I think that's really interesting.
Well, I think honoring that there are introverts and extroverts, you can guarantee that extroverts are like ready to get into it, talk, and they're chatty Cathys. But you want to start with the introverts because, and I think we've come a long way from like, you're an introvert or an extrovert. We know that you can be, and I would go as far as to guess you're an extrovert, as am I, but we recharge as an introvert. Like, I don't want to talk. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want my kids near me. I want to like me time.
Yeah.
But like on a very simplistic level, when you're in a room, you want to appease the introverts, the people that break out in hives at the thought of like having to stand up and introduce themselves to a room full of 30 people, which, let's be honest, I think most of us feel butterflies about having to do that, even if they're your colleagues.
Yeah.
So one technique is to, before you throw people into that situation where you're like, stand on your feet and introduce yourself, highly stress producing activity, turn to the person next to you and have a quick chat about what you did on the weekend, or like the greatest thing that happened to you in the last 24 hours. So for one, you're creating intimate connections, and that feels safe. The brain can go, oh, there's one person I can do that. I'm not being exposed. And 2, you're creating a personal connection. So personal stories build rapport, and we like people that are like us. So if we can find commonalities of like, oh, they've got kids, or they've got family, or they like kicked a footy around, oh cool, I can relate to that. We're building the neural networks and the like heart coherence, which has been measured to create that safety. So yeah, that's one technique, is to first form one-on-one connections. Then you can work to like groups of 4 or 5, and then you're at the place where you can go, okay, let's hear from the audience, like thoughts on this, and like people are more willing to put up their hand and actually stand up and speak. But like safety is the name of the game. At a dinner party, at a conference, at a wedding, any social occasion, on a Zoom conference, like don't just jump into your meeting, like build some rapport and personal connections. So icebreakers are good, or even creating breakout rooms in small groups, small numbers. Yeah.
There you go. Free advice from Anika. How much are you charging us for that one?
That's free. You can have it.
I'm going to start wrapping up things here, but I've got a question for you for the end of this episode.
Yes, please.
What's one of your most irrational fears?
Maybe it's jumping out of a plane.
Oh, are you going to do it once you reopen?
I still feel like I might die, and I feel like my kids need me.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually
is it
a very valid point. So my irrational fear is seaweed and drowning, because seaweed has captured hold of me. I'm a really strong swimmer, but the moment I see seaweed below me, it's as if I forget how to swim.
Sorry, you feel like it might like tangle around your leg?
Like a cartoon, like come up and like pull me down, or something will appear out of the seaweed. Yeah, that's my irrational fear.
Oh, so like would also deep water where you can't see the bottom be quite terrifying for you?
Yeah, I had this incident where we parked the boat in Croatia, and I asked the guys on the boat, hey, is there no seaweed? And they're like, no, there's no seaweed. And then what happened was the shadow of the boat started moving, and as it like the sun hit the water, I'm in the water and there's seaweed below me. I started to panic. The guys had to come out. I'm a really strong swimmer, really strong. And I lose all functionality. So it's a fear that I'm working through. Maybe I just need to go sit like with it for a little bit. Just cover myself up in seaweed. I don't know.
Oh, wow. How funny is the human brain? Maybe a past life you did get taken under.
Hey, who knows? Drowned because of seaweed.
Oh. On that note,
yes.
Thank you for listening.
No, thank you for listening. I mean, thank you for chatting.
Thank you to our listeners for listening and for us to chatting.
Yes. We'll be back hopefully with another episode. We're keeping each other accountable. And until next time, folks.
See you on the flip side, and cut the fluff.
Woo. Cut that out.